Yeah, so I'm just gonna start with, or is it okay if I start? Or are we still waiting for people?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. Definitely, it is.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my name is Segun Famisa. I work at SoundCloud um, as an Android engineer. I used to work at Conga. At some point, I worked in CC Hub. At some point, I worked in Andela back home. So it's quite an opportunity, quite an honor to be talking to Nigerian folks again after quite some time. Um, yeah, so um, my journey to the industry started shortly after I graduated from university. And also back in the university, I used to be involved in a lot of community developer events, like with the Google developer groups. I was an active member of the GDG in Lagos, and also in Ife in OAU, where I went to university. So that basically was like my intro into being a developer or being active in the developer community. And then when I finished school, actually, no. So during my program, I happened to have a mentor who kind of like told me things to learn. Like from time to time, he'd tell me, "Oh, why not learn this thing? It's new. Why not learn this?" And just like that, he also told me about Android, and I was like, "Oh, there's this new operating system that's Linux based. Why not try to learn how to build for it?" And I downloaded a bunch of books that I never read, downloaded a couple of video courses that I never watched. So I mean, it just happened because like he wasn't an Android developer himself, so there was little he could do, but he was just telling me the things to do. And I was fortunate enough to be able to like somehow just learn things with some hands-on projects, also with some books that I managed to read halfway-ish. And in hindsight, that kind of created a small problem because like I didn't know what to read or what not to read. I was just reading things as they came my way, which I'm really excited about this program because it gives you an actual curriculum that you can learn with, and you won't have the back and forth that I had. For example, I had like four kind of books, and I would read one chapter here, read the other chapter here. It was a mess. Um, but luckily, I realized this problem and decided to stick with one resource and actually learn and created a curriculum basically for myself to learn these things. And then by the time I was done with university, I was ready for my first job, and I worked in a startup in CC Hub as the Android developer. I was the only one on the project, and it was quite interesting because it was a very small team. We're like one, two, three. We're four um, people on the team, three engineers at some point, and the CEO of the company. Um, it was quite an experience having to manage all of those things by myself without knowing much myself. But still, we were able to do things. It was at the beginning of when material design was becoming a thing, and then we happened to do a rewrite of the app. So we incorporated a lot of the material design guidelines and all that stuff. And the app was actually featured in a presentation by the vice president of on the Android One project that was visiting Lagos at that point. And there was an event where they showcased the app basically, and it was a proud moment for me because it was like my second app in production, and it was exciting to have gone through that. And then after that, I worked a bit at Conga, the online shopping, and then I worked at Andela as a senior consultant. Then I moved to Germany about 2.5 years ago-ish, and I worked at Trivago. Trivago is a hotel search platform, kind of like hotels.ng. Yeah. And then from there, I moved to SoundCloud, where I work now. In the course of this journey, I also became a Google Developer Expert for Android. And what that means is that I'm active in the community, and I demonstrated proficiency. Is that what we call it? Yeah, proficiency in the use of Android technology, like in my knowledge of Android technology. And I was able to demonstrate it by writing blog posts, uh, speaking at conferences, speaking at, I think, about 15 conferences across the world. And yeah, it's been such a nice experience for me, being an Android developer and being active in the developer community. And at some point I met, also I think it was when I was in CC Hub, I met Taiwo and Kenny from Starter, and that's how I actually got to know them. And they're top folks, and I'm excited about this program they're doing. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your journey, Segun. Yeah. No, there isn't. I don't know if any of the trainees have any question at this point, or if we could just move ahead to the next phase. So would you like them to introduce themselves so that as you carry along?
I'm also surprised there's no faces. I'm the only one with the video. But it's okay. Yeah, but it's been nice to know the people I'm talking to. Hello.
Yeah, good afternoon, Segun. My name is Taiwo. Well, I started this Android journal last year, September, October. I was learning Java basically, so I just wanted to probably learn something with the programming language. So I dived into Android, and I started Android ending of last year. So that was the basic my journey actually. So that's been interesting, stressful, annoying, but you just have to keep grinding. That's just
Of course. Cool. Nice to meet you, Taiwo. Is there anyone else?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Malamide.
Okay, good afternoon, Segun. Malamide.
Yeah, good afternoon.
I actually started my 100 journey like relatively earlier than the class. That was in May, June. I got on with ALC, that's this Mandela Learning Community Program. So I took ALC 4.0, and so that was the beginning of my Android journey. But before then, I've probably been doing Java for like a year or so before that. And it's been coming along fine. And yeah, we're pushing. But at least compared to early times when I first started, at least now I'm having, one or two things are making slightly more sense than they used to.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. Cool. Thank you for the intro.
I guess I'm the last person. Sorry, I won't be able to share my screen with you because I'm looking a little rough.
That's fine.
My name is Jimmy. You must have guessed by now. Started my Android journey late November last year. Been on Java for a couple of years. Found it best to transition to the Android development platform since basically I'll just be taking advantage of what I've been using. But I found it was not so easy as I thought it will be, because the Android platform is a different ball game entirely from normal Java that I've been used to. But it's been exciting thus far. Been challenging, so, and I love where I say challenge, so stuck with it so far.
Cool. Nice. Yeah. So it seems that folks have like had experience with Java before, and then just applying the Java knowledge in Android is what we're doing now, right?
Yeah, basically, yes.
Okay, cool. Nice. Yeah, I also looked through like the other series that you've done. I noticed that there's been like a session on dependency injection. There's been a session on Android architecture itself. So because the topic I'm speaking about today, which is like Android architecture components, is slightly related to architecture. I hope, like, does anyone have questions that might linger on from the past session? You can feel free to ask me now as well. If you have any questions, you could also wait till the end if you want. But yeah.
I think waiting till the end works for me. I think so,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, cool. That's fine. Yeah. So yeah, I'm also working from home today actually because there's coronavirus.
Sounds like that's how you feel about the whole thing.
Oh my God. I thought I said, okay, Google. So I've been working from home because there's coronavirus in Berlin. And yeah, we're like in a lockdown mode. So in case you're wondering why I'm not at work. Anyway, I'm going to share my screen now and start the presentation. How do I do that? Cool, found it. Yep. Can you all see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we can.
And now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Cool. So, like I said, I'm talking about Android architecture components, which is kind of like a build up on the previous sessions you might have had about Android architecture in general. I don't know if you might have heard about like MVVM architecture or MVP architecture, or clean architecture, or MVI, or Viper, or one of these popular names, fancy names. And Android architecture components is just a set of tools that that help us to implement this architecture. So in this presentation, I designed it like an FAQ style. So we're going to like answer some of these questions, like what are architecture components? Why should I use them? What are these components themselves? Like how do they fit together? How can I set them up? There's so many. Which one do I have to use? Do I have to use everything? What else do I need to know about these architecture components that we already didn't talk about, and how I can learn more about them? Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically like architecture components are tools that are added to the Jetpack suite. It was announced, I think, in 2017. In case you might have heard before now, Android development was quite painful. It was so difficult to do some things. And basically, all our code was just dumped into the activity. You went to network, you put it there. And after some time, it became a thing where people would say, oh no, you should not put like network calls in your activity. You should put them in a controller. And we would then say, oh yeah, cool. And then we'll put the code in the controller. And that led to a different set of problems like memory leaks and all that stuff. And then very recently, the architectures evolved again into like the MVP, MVVM, MVI, and the likes. But also there's some of the problems were actually like fundamental problems that the Android framework had to solve, but they were not solved. So even these architectures started to have their own problems. And because of that, the team at Google decided to solve some of these problems for us and release them as libraries. It's also an opportunity for Google to make an opinion about all of these architectures, since they were already going wild. There was like a bunch of them and different ways people implement different things. And this was an opportunity for Google to become opinionated on this topic of architecture. So why should I use these components? The first one, of course, is for good architectural practices. Specifically, like some of these architectural components help to separate concerns. They help to implement like data-driven UI. And basically what that means is that your UI always reflects the state of the data you have. And this is especially useful for things like when you have to implement configuration changes on your phone, in your app, like maybe the user rotated their phones or the system killed the app, and then you're trying to restore the state. So your UI always represents like the data that you have stored. And these libraries help to ensure that. Yeah, a bunch of problems arose from how people handle lifecycle, activity lifecycle. I'm pretty sure those people that are new to Android might have found it a bit challenging, because like there's a bunch of callbacks. There's on create, on start, on pause, on resume, on stop, on this, on that. And then, can you see that screen?
Yes, we can still see your screen.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it flickered here, so I was wondering what happened. Oh, so yeah, it basically helps with handling lifecycle events and all that stuff. Android X is a set of libraries that's adjacent to like architecture components, and it helps to implement backward compatibility. It's also really important. And the architecture components work well with the rest of the Jetpack. You know, I said like it's like a superset. Jetpack is like a superset of tools, and architecture components are like one of those tools. So there are a bunch of tools that are related to architecture. There are some that are related to behavior. There are some that are related to UI, and all of them together are on that Jetpack. And architecture components work well across all of the other libraries. So it's another good reason to use them. So what are these architecture components themselves? You might have heard about some of them before: ViewModel, LiveData, Room, WorkManager, Navigation Library, Paging Library, and so on. It's actually a growing list. I feel like these are like the most important ones, but it's not necessarily the exhaustive list. I have some resources that you can use to check up the entire list if you want, if you're interested. But these are the ones you might typically use that you might use in a typical app. And then how do you use them? How do they fit together? It's just like a bunch of libraries, right? And most applications have this structure. There is like an activity or fragment, which is like the top level of the UI. And then the view model fits in between your data, and the UI. And in the view model, you can use LiveData. I'm still going to talk about what this means later. You don't have to worry for now. And then it communicates with the data via repository, but data could be stored in your database via SQLite and Room, or in your network via Retrofit, or whatever networking library you're using. Yeah, so this is like the big picture of everything. Previously, like most of this code would live in the activity or in some controller somewhere. And that was like a heavy coupling. And then it was super difficult to test because it was too close to the Android framework, and we would have to simulate the Android framework every time you had to write tests, which means you had to use external libraries like Roboelectric, and testing was basically really difficult. But now when each layer is separated, you can test the database layer separately, you can test the network layer separately, you can test the interaction between the local DB and the network web service. You can test the interaction via the repository. You can test the interaction between the view model and the data layer. You can test the interaction between the view model and the view. So it's much easier to test now because everything is broken into components. And you can see how the separation of concern comes in, because the SQL, if you put a code in this model layer, I mean, it doesn't even need to care about the UI layer, right? Because it's out of the scope of fetching data from the database. It's out of scope, so it doesn't even know anything about that. Also, similarly here, it doesn't know anything about how are you showing this list in a recycler view, or are you showing it in a view pager, or is it a button on the UI? The repository doesn't know. Similarly, the view model also has partial knowledge about the UI, but not quite. It just knows about the UI state, not the actual UI. So the view model will typically know about, should I show a progress? But the view model doesn't know exactly what the progress looks like, because the state is handled in the activity of the fragment. That's where we say, oh yeah, let's show a dialogue. Oh no, let's show some fancy animation. Oh no, let's just not show anything. Let's keep the user surprised. So that's, you can see how the separation of concerns comes into play here. And that is actually one of the keys to building a very robust and scalable application. So the view model is like the VM in the MVVM architecture. And I believe you might be familiar from the last session you had on architecture. The MVVM is model view model. So the last two VM is talking about this view model. And this is the reason why most people use architecture components with the MVVM architecture, because it's basically built for it. And one of the advantages of the MVVM architecture over the close sibling, the MVP, is that the view model doesn't hold any reference to the UI. So it doesn't know exactly how the UI is showing, or what the UI is showing, or what the UI even looks like. All it knows is that there are UI states. For example, a list of students taking this program, or a Boolean whether or not we should show the progress, or list of images. It knows those things, but it has no idea how they're shown. So it has no reference to the view, and it just emits these things as states, as events, and then the UI subscribes to these events, and then the UI interprets these events as states exactly how it wants. So if the UI happens to be a smartwatch, in the activity of the smartwatch app, you then listen for these events, and then you show the things how you want them to show on a watch. If it's a car like a auto application, then you show it differently. Then if it's a phone, you show it differently. If it's a tablet, you show it differently. But they're all listening to the same view model. And that's one of the interesting things about the MVVM architecture. So it's a really nice architecture, and I can understand why Google would choose this to base their architecture components on top of. You should know that the fact that it's like called a view model doesn't strictly mean that you have to use the MVVM architecture. I've seen examples of people who use the view model with MVP architecture, It's basically like just a presenter, but it's called the view model. Some people see it that way. And the reason why people would do this is because the view model from the architecture components is lifecycle aware. And what this means is that, okay, so before I talk about that, actually, I should talk about the typical lifecycle of an application. So if you have an application, it starts, there's onCreate, and then you set the content view, and then you set all your data. And then if the system is killing the activity or you're closing the app, unsaved instance state is called, then on pause, then on stop, then on destroy, right? That's the life cycle. Coincidentally, when configurations change on Android, for example, you change the language of your phone or you rotate your phone, it also destroys this activity. So it follows the same path as if you pressed back and like left the app. So it follows the same activity lifecycle and gets destroyed and gets recreated. And then it becomes much more difficult to reconstruct the UI. And if you, for example, if you had like a network request going on when the user rotated their phones or rotates their phones, then you have to bother about cleaning up the request. And then when they rotate, you have to start another request or you attach it to the ongoing request. So it's so difficult handling lifecycle events. And this is where ViewModel comes in super handy because this is what its lifecycle looks like. You create, you start to resume, then you rotate the app, then on pause is called stop and destroy. But the view, you'll see on the right here that the view model is still alive. And then onCreate is called and just basically reattaches to the existing view model. So whatever you have stored in the view model is there when you recreate the view model, which is one of the important things, important reasons why people use the view model. And if you completely finish the activity now, then it goes through the terminal phase on pause, on stop, on destroy, and then on cleared, the view model is cleared, and then that's the end of the life cycle. So it comes in really handy. By the way, I'm going to share the presentation with you because all of these titles have links that you could, links to the correct pages on the documentation that you can click on and see more information if you want to. Yeah, basically this is how like the view model solves the problem of the life cycle. Another closely related architecture component is LiveData. LiveData is everyone familiar with RxJava? Hello?
We've done an intro into it. We've worked with it. We all are familiar with it. Okay,
awesome, awesome. So you can think of the LiveData as sort of like an observable, but it's more than an observable. It's lifecycle aware. Again, because lifecycle has caused a lot of pains in the past. And, you know, for example, if you create an observable in your activity, you know, a disposable, if you subscribe to an observable in your activity, you know, on destroy, you have to clean that observable, that disposable. With LiveData, the LiveData is already aware. LiveData already has a lifecycle owner. So it already knows when this lifecycle owner says, yep, it's time to destroy. So it already knows and it self-destructs. So you don't have to like bother with all of that additional code that you normally have to write if you're using RxJava. That said, the LiveData is, but not necessarily a replacement for your Rx observable. You can use both together. I've used both together in projects and they work very well together. You can also use LiveData with coroutines in Kotlin if you're using Kotlin. By the way, are you using Kotlin? Sorry, I'm asking so many questions. Are you using Kotlin?
No, we are not. We're not.
You're using Java?
Yes, in Java.
Okay, cool. That's fine. Yeah. So in case you're using Kotlin or you feel like you want to explore Kotlin, LiveData also works with Kotlin coroutines. So it also somehow, I mean, if it works with, you don't even have to use any special threading network. If you're using the Java concurrency framework, it also works fine. So the LiveData can stop emitting at a specific lifecycle event you want. So let's think about this. Usually, if you want to listen for location updates from a user's phone, and you put that code in your activity, let's say you're displaying something on a map, and then the user either kills the app or rotates their phone for a bigger screen, screen real estate. Not only you will have to do a lot of cleanup by yourself, you remove the callbacks you're using to listen for location updates to prevent memory leaks, of course. And then when the activities were created, you attach a callback to it again. Instead of having to do all of this manual process, you could write your own live data that like location updates data, which is going to be like an extension of live data, and it's going to become lifecycle aware, so that by itself it just stops emitting when when the activity is paused, because the user is not seeing the screen directly, so there's no point updating the UI, right? So you can make the live data lifecycle aware and respond to whatever events you want, whatever lifecycle events you want. And with this, make sure that the UI always matches the state of your data. And because you don't have to do any extra work with lifecycle related issues, so all of the potential memory leaks that come out of mishandled life cycles, all of those are automatically eliminated. Of course, this doesn't mean that you're completely free of memory leaks in your application. There's still a number of ways you can suffer memory leaks in your app. And by the way, just for clarity, memory leaks, in case anyone on the call doesn't really understand what it is that if you have objects, you have a lot of objects in memory, and the garbage collector is not able to remove them for you, or the garbage collector is getting overworked and things like that, then you start to have problems, memory problems in your app. And then the memory usage of your app starts to grow. And at some point, it's going to exceed the allowed memory allocation for your application. And what happens then is that your app starts to throw out of memory exception. And that's really bad because the app is just going to keep crashing on the user. I've worked on a project where by the time the user gets to the second page of the application, then the app starts going out of memory. And that's problematic for the users because then they're not able to use your apps for long before it starts going out of memory, and then they just uninstall and use some other app. So memory leaks is one of the things that most people are excited about when it comes to architecture components and how they solve these problems. Yeah. Another interesting library that's part of the architecture component is Room. Have you folks had the opportunity to work with data SQLite yet?
Yes.
Okay, did you use Room or did you use SQLite Raw?
I've used the two.
Okay.
On this topic, I'm not sure I'm speaking for everybody.
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay. So if you've used SQLite before, or if you've not, SQLite is like the data persistence, is like the database that's shipped with Android OS. It's an open source database, but it's also the one that works on Android OS. And previously, it's been a bit difficult to work with SQLite because it requires a lot of processes to get it working. You need to like have a database open helper. You need to get an anchor on the database. You need to open the database. You need to write your query and execute the statement. Then you need to use a cursor to read the statement, to read the results of your query. And then you need to like build it into an object and then return it to the rest of your code. And it's so much boilerplate work. It's so annoying that a lot of people have written abstractions over it. There's one called SQL Delight. It's written by Square. So because this is also another pain point in Android development, Google decided to also write a library for it. And that's how Room came out. It works with SQLite under the hood, and it's super easy to use. To read or write data from the database, it's super easy. It also works well with RxJava or like Java concurrency framework or Kotlin coroutines if you're using Kotlin. Another interesting thing that I like about Room is that it has schema validation. So if you happen to write a wrong, if you happen to write like a wrong migration code, it's actually very possible for you to test and see that this migration works well. And basically how that works is that it compares the two schematics for the past version you have and the current version you have, and compares them and sees that is it possible to actually migrate from this to this? Is there a table named this in the old version that you're migrating from, and things like that. So it has like a lot of validation that you can do. Also, it has like compile time safety. So if you write like your select statement or like basically if you write an SQL statement and it's not a valid SQL statement, Room library will detect this when you're compiling, and it's going to tell you, hey, this statement here is not valid, you should check it out. Which is way better than if you had to write it by hand without Room. You would actually not know until you try to run the app before you know that, yeah, my SQL code is bad. Which is one of the reasons why I really like Room. But yeah, this is like the architecture. There's a database somewhere there, which is like SQL still at the end. Then you have DAOs, which are like data access objects. And then you have entities. Entities kind of like represent what the table looks like in the row. So if you have like a user table, then you'll likely have a user entity. And then the fields in the entity become the columns in the table. So you get data from the Room database via the data access objects, and you also write to it via the data access objects. And it's super convenient because a lot of this you don't have to write. You just have to write your data access objects and your entities, and then Room creates the table if it doesn't exist. If you call your data access object to insert, Room generates the query to actually insert. And all of this is done at compile time. So if there's a problem with any step of this, your compile is not going to succeed, which is good because you get early feedback. And generally in software engineering, like the earlier you can get feedback, the better. Because like if this code is not going to compile, if this code is going to fail when it gets to the user's phone, I would actually prefer if it fails to compile right now so that I can know and I can fix it. And Room comes in really handy here. The next one I want to talk about is also one that I really like, and that's WorkManager. I don't know if you had to build an application at this level of complexity yet, but there are some times where you need to like do some background work. For example, let's say, I don't know, let's say you're building an app to track, I don't know, maybe you're building for, I don't know, you have like a fleet of cars or delivery trucks that you're trying to build an app for. And you have to like keep updating, excuse me, you have to keep updating the status of this app or the drivers or whatever as time goes on. So these are like background tasks because you don't necessarily need to do them in the UI because like the user is, the driver is even busy driving, so they're not even looking at the phone. This is how you know, like, yeah, this has like a background job, right? And then what this does is that it allows you to write some of these jobs on the background, and especially if they're long running, like you're making a network request, you're checking something in some database and things like that. So you can schedule jobs, say at 4 p.m. every day, check the driver's phone and upload all of their deliveries for the day. You could also add constraints like, yes, at 4 p.m., if they are Wi-Fi network and their battery is charging, upload this data for me. You can also add like a lot of constraints. You can add if it's a one-time thing or it's a recurring job. So if you're actually working with offline, if you're building an app to work offline, chances are that you will need WorkManager. Because from time to time, when the network connectivity changes, you want to sync with the back end, with the cloud. So say, for example, you're building an app to, I don't know, like a point of sale, like a sale register. You don't always have to depend on network for that, right? If someone is trying to buy something, imagine having to wait for network before, oh, sorry, you can't buy that yet. My network glow is not going well, and things like that. So it's not very good for the user. So you want to make some things offline, like buying, registering a new sale, you want to make it offline. But at some point, when the connectivity situation becomes better, you want to make sure it syncs everything to the cloud and it's backed up. That's where WorkManager comes in really, really handy. And I like it a lot. Also because it can work well with your RX Java, it works well with your coroutines, it works well with your normal Java future, Java thread, the whole concurrency framework thing. It works very fine. And also it offers a lot of backward compatibility. Originally, WorkManager came from, I think, Android 8, I'm gonna guess now, I'm not sure anymore if it's from 8 or from 7. There were some restrictions on how to start background jobs in Android from that version. And then if you had to implement for lower versions, you had to use either a third-party library or to use Firebase job dispatcher. Or so like if you were not using this WorkManager, you'd have to say if the version of this app, if the OS version of this phone is above 8, then use WorkManager to do this. Else, if it's below 8, but greater than 5, which is Lollipop, then use Firebase. Then if it's lower than Firebase, then use Evernote job dispatcher. So that's like a lot of complexity. You have to manage 3 libraries just to do the same thing. And that's why WorkManager comes in, because it offers this backward compatibility out of the box. You don't need to bother about all of that complexity. And it's one of my favorite ones. Another one is navigation. I don't know if you've heard this yet, but like fragments and navigation are like one of the most painful things about Android development. A lot of people really, really, really dislike fragments because it's difficult to work with. And very recently, Google has been suggesting a single activity approach to building apps, which means you have only one activity and every other screen in that app is a fragment. It's controversial. Some people like it, some people don't. But if you like it, then the navigation library helps you a lot, because like a lot of these things are abstracted and they become like destinations. So if you're going to this screen, it becomes a destination. If you're navigating from here to here, it's a destination. And when you look at it, you end up with something that looks like a graph data structure, which is something that you probably cannot hold in your head. Like, okay, this screen, you can get to it from here, you can also get here, you can also get here and get back to this screen. And that becomes super, super difficult to manage on very large apps. Some apps have, like, I recently learned that Facebook Messenger, or is it Facebook Messenger? No, Facebook. One of the Facebook apps has like 300 screens. Like, there's no way you can actually know which screen leads to which screen on that app. But navigation library actually comes with a UI editor, and it shows you, you can look at the graph and visualize it, which is super, super helpful. And a lot of the redundant code that we always have to write, not redundant, boilerplate code that we have to write, get fragment manager dot begin transaction dot add dot animate dot do this dot do that dot commit, and then before you actually show a fragment. That's so much work. A lot of people write their own abstractions on top of fragments. Most applications that I've worked with have this level of abstraction on top of how they navigate between activities and between fragments. And all of this goes away if you use the navigation library. In addition to that, the library also offers these safe arguments. Most times we're like passing things from screen to screen. For example, we're passing ID. For example, say you have a list of users that follow me. Let's say we're trying to build like a Twitter clone, and you have a list of users that follow you. If you click on that list, you want to display the details of that user, right? So we might want to pass in the ID of that user that I've just clicked from that list into the details screen, where we now fetch the details of this user. So it's very common to want to pass data from strings or like integers or even like some small objects between screens. And normally you would have to like put it in the bundle and then put the bundle as the arguments of the fragment, or you put it in the intent of the activity you're going to, and things like that. So it's like so much work that disappears when you just use safe args. And it's compile time safe. So if you're expecting a string and you're passing an int, if you're expecting a string in code, you cannot pass in an int. It's not going to work. And that's super, super nice, because there's a lot of confidence when you know this thing is not going to work, then I know it's not going to work, or I know it's not possible to mistakenly pass the wrong type. And yeah, this is what like the graph looks like when you're visualizing. You see that you can go from this screen to this screen to this screen, and it's super easy to visualize this way. And there's this editor in Android Studio, which makes everything super easy. For those that have iOS experience, this is also like fairly similar to the storyboard experience of iOS. But from what I hear from iOS engineers, they also think this is it's better implemented than Xcode's storyboard. So it's super nice. And then, yeah, so these nice architecture components, how do you set them up? It's fairly straightforward, I think. You need to add the Google repositories to the project level repositories, where you define like JCenter, Maven, basically where do we get these dependencies from. Google also has one of those, so you can put it there. And in the module that you want to import it, you just import it like any other dependency. It's fairly straightforward. Yeah. So do you have to use everything for architecture components? Nope. On my current projects in SoundCloud, we don't use everything. We don't even use Google's view models. In my last team in Trivago, we use architecture components, we use WorkManager, we use Room. We didn't always use Room. We had a different database that we were using, but we migrated to Room. We didn't use paging library. We didn't use navigation. We didn't use LiveData, but we use view models. So like you actually don't have to use everything. You just need to use the ones that solve the problem you have. That's why it's good to like have a general overview of what's out there, what are the opportunities, what are the possibilities. But the decision of taking, the decision of using one library or not depends on your specific needs. What else do you need to know? Jetpack is super big. It's a big suite of libraries. Some people are even saying it's too big. Now it's confusing, but I think it's actually better because like I can use exactly what I want to use from the whole suite. I don't have to like, back in the days, there was this thing called support library. Support library was just a huge dependency, an artifact that you pull into your project, and boom, you exceed your 64,000 method limit. And it was so big, so now they're breaking it down. If you want some special things from fragments, you import the fragment. If you want some special things from activities, you import the activity dependency, which is also part of Jetpack, but is not part of architecture components. So architecture components is a group of dependencies that help make life easier, but they are also underneath the Jetpack. So the Jetpack is like the umbrella thing. These terms might get confusing because if you just Google search Android Jetpack, then you get to see a lot of random things that you didn't expect. So if you're using Kotlin, most of these dependencies have the KTX version, which is like the Kotlin extension version, which includes all of the excuse me, which includes all of the fancy features that Kotlin provides, the null safety, the better syntaxes, and all that, syntactic sugar, and all of that stuff. Then there are way more tools. You should look at this link here. It contains all of the links, all of the tools. That's like the most that's the most comprehensive list. You have KTX, you have data binding libraries, you have preferences, you have something for media in case you are doing something with media playback or whatever. There's a compatibility library for camera if you want to work with camera, which is also another painful part of Android development because each device manufacturer implements things differently. For example, Samsung devices are different. They implement some things differently. Sony devices implement some things differently. For example, if you take a photo, if you launch a camera intent to take a photo on some devices, they come back rotated. So if you're building a social media app where the user has to upload their profile picture, if you just take whatever the camera gives you, you might end up with an image that is rotated. So Camera X helps to solve some of these problems. Not everything, it's still in development. An interesting thing about all of this is that they are all open source. So you can actually look and find the sources. I don't know if you know about this new tool called Code Search. I think it's called cs.developer.android.com or something like that. I'm going to put it in the resources actually. So you can search for the code. So if you see a class, you can put it in the code search and find the source and look at how it works. Because I found that looking under the hood, checking out how these things work, helped me in my understanding of these things, these concepts in general. So you might also want to do that. There are a bunch of resources out there, the Google Developer page, then there are a bunch of code labs. I managed to put in like some, but there are way more. There's the navigation, there's the lifecycle aware components, there's the WorkManager, paging, and a lot of them. And then there is this Sunflower sample app, you might have come across it. It's like the flagship sample application for a lot of architecture components. I think for Jetpack, in fact, because it has many of the libraries in Jetpack in use there. So you can see how they use it. And in case you have problems with, say, WorkManager, you can go there to see, why do I have this problem and they don't? And try to see what's different in your implementation. Yeah, and I think with that, yeah, I think that's the end of the presentation. Yep. I wonder if anyone had questions. Did I lose anyone somewhere? Yeah, feel free to ask. Was it clear? Was it helpful? I don't know.
Yeah, please, could you share your slide?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to share it.
Okay.
Maybe I should do that now. I just wanted to add one more thing. Code search. I'm going to send it to Okwe, and they will get it across to you, I guess.
Okay.
Someone was going to ask something.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what's the major difference between job scheduler, sorry, and WorkManager?
Yeah, I'd say they're effectively the same. The WorkManager is what ties everything together. Like in the past, like I said, the implementation of job schedulers was different in each platform. Like you could only use it for, say, Android versions 23, that's 8, Android version 8 and above. And then for Lollipop and between 21 and 23, you could only use Firebase Job Dispatcher, which is like the backward compatible version of Job Scheduler. So basically now WorkManager is just a library that ties everything together. So you don't need to bother about, does it use Job Scheduler under the hood, or does it use Evernote's Job Scheduler under the hood, or does it use Alarm Manager and Broadcast Receiver, or does it use something? Now you don't have to know if you use WorkManager. But I mean, if you're working on versions from 23, you can access Job Scheduler directly from the framework because it's there. But if you want backward compatibility, then you're better off using WorkManager, which actually uses Job Scheduler under the hood for the versions where it's available.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just by the way, how difficult did you find Android development early on in your career?
I would say it wasn't. It was a bit challenging, especially because I was mostly working in the dark alone, because I didn't have people to learn from directly, people who had experience with Android development. I wasn't able to ask them stuff directly. But I think in general, I would say it wasn't difficult. It was just challenging because I didn't understand some stuff, and I didn't know anyone to ask. And there were so many resources that were confusing. But nowadays, there's a lot more effort from Google's side. So the documentation is much better than it used to be. So I would say we live the different eras. So it's difficult for me to, I think it's going to be unfair if I say it was hard, and then it doesn't mean anything for you now, because the things have changed a lot. But overall, I would say it was okay. It wasn't significantly more difficult than it is now.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm curious, did anyone actually use this before today?
Components. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, I said I've used a couple of the architecture component libraries.
Okay.
Because I've worked with paging, I've worked with ViewModel, LiveData, a couple of them, but I've not worked with NavGraph.
Okay.
I've been trying to get the hang of it, but it's been
Evasive?
I don't know. Yeah, exactly, evasive.
Do you know what exactly has been like tricky? Do you know? Maybe I can help with.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Do you have like specific part of it that was confusing for you or something? It's okay if you're also not able to think about it right now. You could just think about it and write me an email or something.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay, well, I was saying, yeah, I can think of one or two things right now, but I'll also love to send you the mail.
Okay,
That'll be
that's fine.
better too.
That's fine.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, I also have a question for the folks here. Like in general, like what have you been building like so far?
I don't know, nobody's talking, so let me go first. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So earlier on with the LOC program, there was this notekeeper. It's actually part of a tutorial, but I tried to work on it alone. Then from there,
I lost you. Hello?
hello, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
I think I'm having network issues.
Oh, okay.
So, as I was saying, the tutorial that I said I tried to work on alone.
Okay.
Hi. Okay.
Hello?
So, from there, there's this to-do list I was trying to work on. I wanted to use a priority queue to work on it. Just to sort the tasks and all that. But I'm not done with that. But since I started interning here somewhere in Lagos, I've been working on the app, and I don't know, that's like the largest project I've worked on. And I'm also the only Android developer there. So it's been coming along tough. It's like a booking app. It's a booking app because it's a co-working space, among other things. But I'm trying to work on the co-working space part of things where you can book for space from anywhere and all that. I'm currently at the part of the integrating payment.
Okay.
Wow. Hello?
Hello?
Okay, I'm so sorry about this network.
Yeah, it's all right.
Okay, so as I was saying, I'm currently at the part of integrating payment. So I'll use all these third-party services like Flutterwave or Paystack or something like that. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so it's been challenging so far, but because of the scale of the project.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just felt if I had, I don't know, it's telling my team members. But anyway, it's challenging. Yeah, I've been trying to.
So you're saying, yes, it sounds like it from more experienced folks.
I,
It's like, I think the fact that there's like not enough senior people to work with at work, it's usually like a problem for new people. But like in the meantime, while that's a problem that needs to be fixed, I think you can also work with your peers.
okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. As for me, what I just tried to do is that I stick to Udacity's material. I actually use Udacity's material. So when I
Okay.
actually learn a particular concept, I try to build something out of it. But most of the time, I'm always, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So most of the time, when I'm actually trying to build something, I'm always having issues, bugs, and I try to reach out to my other colleagues because I'm just how do I put it? I started Java late last year, so it was I just learned basic Java. So there are times whereby when I'm just trying to build something, I need to get some advanced Java concepts to actually build it. So that means I need to do a little bit more research on what I need to actually use on a particular concept.
Yeah.
So that's actually my issue. But most of the time I actually reach out to Olamide and another colleague because they're actually far better off. So that's just it. But it has been very challenging because there are times when I get stuff like that, I just have to say that, man, am I good enough? This kind of feeling that, man, I don't think I'm worth it. But I'm actually just pushing, sure. That's just it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the right attitude. Yeah, there are also times I feel like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing and stuff like that. So it's like it's a thing to feel like that from time to time. Yeah, a lot of times you just like shake it off or try to think about the good things you've learned, like how you've made progress over the time. Like maybe like a year ago you didn't know anything about Android development and now you do. That's already progress. So it already
Yes.
means that it's worth it. It's worth the while. It's worth the time. It's worth the effort and stuff like that. So on the other hand, like if you feel like your knowledge of Java is a problem, then you can also like read some books on the side. Excuse me. That will help you learn Java well. That's I actually had the same problem because I was learning Java and learning. So I actually first learned and worked with J2ME applications, that's Java for like senior S40 and E60 phones. I also had similar problems where I was learning the language and learning the platform at the same time. But like, what I did was, when I found out that the language was holding me down, then I took some time to actually learn the language properly. Now, because like I was getting familiar enough with the Android development, or like the J2ME, Java for mobile development, and I was able to then focus more on the language itself, because it was already becoming like blockers for me, basically. So I think you can also do the same. I don't even know what Java good books are out there right now, but there's also this book called Thinking in Java. No, that's the one I was going to recommend. Wait, is it? It was Echo. Is it? Seriously? I'm going to find out the name of the book, actually. I don't think it's Thinking in Java.
No, is it Head First?
No, not Head First. Not Head First. Yeah, I actually don't remember the name of the book, but I also read Thinking in Java, and it helped me a lot. But there's also this one about, it's about best practices. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know. Effective Java.
Effective.
But I guess Effective Java might be slightly too
Advanced. A bit advanced.
but I don't think so, actually, because I feel like Effective Java is something everyone should like know, because it covers various topics. But then you need to know about the language first. Like, you need to understand the language first before you then start trying to understand effective use of the language, right? So maybe it's good. I think Headfirst Java, Headfirst series is also fine. I use Headfirst for Python once. I think it's also fine. Yeah, but so basically it's like you learn just enough to get your app working. And then when you're so familiar with how to get app working, then you go back to the language and then try to brush up and improve your knowledge of the language. That's a strategy I would suggest.
Okay.
So now that you know how to, at least on the basic level, build an application, it's now time to go back to Java and start to understand things. For example, when I first started J2ME, I had no idea because we were always extending something called midlets. I wasn't really sure exactly what it meant. I wasn't sure about interfaces and abstract classes, what they meant. But I was building my J2ME apps anyway. And then at some point I figured, okay, I can't really go much further without having a solid grasp on the language. So I started learning started focusing more on the language. I think you can also do the same.
Okay, noted.
Thanks.
I sent the name of the book and a link to the O'Reilly page. I sent it in the chat on this call, so you can have a look after.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any more questions? I see that I'm also supposed to talk about insights on, yeah, so I actually don't have a take-home task per se, but like I would just recommend you to, each person on the call, to take a code lab of whichever one they want that's related to architecture components, of course, and try to learn how to use that architecture component. If you're unable to find which one you're interested in, you can also you can communicate it to me, maybe through Okwe, or I don't know how, Okwe, then you can send it to me, that I can search for the correct code lab and send it to you. But there's no right or wrong with the code lab, right? It's just taking you through the process. So there's nothing, I guess, that you can submit to me. So it's just like something for you. So if you're trying to see, like, you've not used, someone on the call has not used navigation before, you could do the code lab and then use it for that small app. Then you already know how it works, and you already know some of the important concepts, and that's like your take home, basically. Sounds good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I was also like to like talk about what employers look for. Honestly, when I'm involved in hiring people who are new to a technology, what I look for mostly is the drive, right? Because I already know that they don't know so much about the platform yet, so it's basically useless trying to see how much they know, because I already know it's not much, which is fine. Everyone starts from there. So what I usually look at personally is how are they showing interest in this thing, right? And unfortunately, the only way to quantify that now is like, are they taking Udacity courses? Are they taking courses on Pluralsight, or are they doing something just to demonstrate the drive? Do they have a project on GitHub that they're trying out? Or do they have some code lab thing that they do? So I also recommend that when you do a code lab, you put it on your GitHub, like you put it there, but you also like, you're not putting it as your own work, of course, but you're like just letting people know that, yeah, I'm practicing this with this code lab, and this is the code, this is the result of my code lab, of the code lab that I did, you know? It's something employers will look out for, like, because it's like a demonstration of passion and intent to actually upskill in this technology. And as you do that, you start to build your portfolio. Like you can let people know, oh yeah, when I was learning this, I built this. When I followed the code lab, then I did this. Then you built this app where you're interning at the moment, and then you did this and did that. So that's like gradually how you build your career portfolio. At the moment, like I don't have any apps that I publish to the store myself. I've never published an app to the store for myself. So I don't think it's necessary to be in your portfolio, but some people think it's necessary, which is fine. If you build an app that you think deserves to be on the store, absolutely go for it. On the other hand, what I try to do is I try to have like a small project where I used to learn things. At the moment, I started yet another one, but I have not finished it. I've not even touched it in like 6 months. So that's also something you can do. Like you can have a project. So like if you take the code lab for navigation components, for example, and you finish the code lab, then you want to try it on a project, but you're too scared to try it on your work project because it might slow you down and things like that. Then you try it on your pet project. which is just something on your GitHub, and then you try it there, see how it works, see how difficult it is to incorporate into existing code and things like that. These things are things I think will be useful to build a career portfolio. For example, last week, a recruiter from, what's the name of this? The new name for Taxify. I don't remember.
Both.
New name, yes, Bolt. Yes, Bolt. A recruiter from Bolt sent me an email and they were like, oh yeah, we saw your project on GitHub, which is the pet project that is incomplete, that I've not worked on in 6 months. And they're like, oh, we saw this project. It's nice that you're trying to stay up to date or learn something. And I think like things like this are valuable and you should try to do that. And about how to find opportunities, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a remote opportunity, there are places to go. I'm not very familiar with places to go for remote opportunities, unfortunately. But if not, there is most things I find are through the Android newsletters like Android Weekly, Android. There are 2 Android newsletters. Does anyone know the other one?
I only know the podcast, Fragmented.
Fragmented podcast. Yes, there's that too.
Stack Overflow.
There's Android. Yeah, there's Stack Overflow jobs. Then there's also this one. I think DroidCon recently started a job portal. DroidCon jobs, I think. Yeah, jobs.droidcon.com. It's pretty new, I think. So it's like a job search for jobs. I think a lot of the jobs that might be in Germany now because DroidCon is based in Germany. But that's totally fine, I think. Also on the site, as you're brushing up your knowledge of the language, you should also brush up, if you don't have a computer science degree like me, if you're like me, who doesn't have a computer science background, you can also like practice your data structures and algorithms. I heard someone talk about priority queue the other time and I was excited. Oh yeah, that like people even who are just learning the technology also care about like the actual data structures, which is one mistake I made. I didn't care about these things. And so I had to like retroactively learn them. If you're in the starting phase now, it's really convenient to like, from time to time, just learn some of these data structures and yeah, like how does a hash map even work? Why do I even really need a hash map? Like, why should I use this instead of that? What's like a sparse array? What is like why do we even have a stack? Why should I use a stack? What can I use it for in Android? Things like that, just having like the knowledge of these data structures and basic algorithms is very handy because if you're interviewing in a lot of foreign companies, they might ask questions related to that because they feel like it's like a fair playing ground where, especially for if you're new to Android, then it means that depending on how you learned Android, you might know more than, say, someone who learned by themselves. It's also a bit unfair to expect someone to give textbook definitions, so it's difficult to test based on the knowledge of Android itself. So I think if your plan is to like apply for jobs abroad, it would be nice to also like get your computer science fundamentals under your belt.
Sorry, regarding that, I have a quick question.
Okay.
So, in your opinion, which do you think takes much more priority? Should we cover design patterns first, or should we look at data structures and algorithms? Because like a lot of resources and limited amount of time. There's so much we can do.
Yeah. For me, I would say like you can defer the data structures and algorithms till later. A lot of them you learn just by chance. A lot of them you learn by chance. But if you have more time, then you can put in structured learning into it. So yeah, that's what I think. I would say to first, now that you're doing a lot of Android, I think you can manage to do some Android and some Java on the side. And as you're learning, as you're getting better with the Java, then you can also look at design patterns. What's a single thing? What's a builder? What's a factory? What's a delegate? What's all of those design patterns? Then it's like learning so many things at the same time. I feel like it's difficult to say, okay, learn Android, stop. You obviously don't want to stop building Android and then say, yeah, it's just a matter of focus. So I think you can focus first on getting a good grasp of the language, because that's what every other thing builds on. So if you learned Android at this point where you can build an app, a simple app, that's cool. That's really good. Then you now go back to the language and try to strengthen your language. And when you feel super comfortable with the language, of course, you're not stopping to build the Android app. So you're still building Android apps, but you're focusing more on the language. You'll see how that directly translates into your code, because it starts to make your Android code much better. Then at some point, after you're very familiar with the language, then you start to learn about the design patterns. And that's when you then start to clean up your code again. Then you look at your code that you wrote 6 months ago and you're like, hey, did I write this? Yeah, that happens. It happens to me now. So I feel like it's just an ongoing process where you keep learning things and keep learning things. I'm also still always learning stuff. Especially like I've been learning Kotlin for a while now, and I'm still finding new stuff. I'm still learning a lot of stuff on Kotlin, in Java, in Android, in software engineering as a whole. So like, it's also one of the things that gets me excited about this field. Like, there's always something to learn. Yeah, so that's what I think I would recommend.
Sorry, I have a question. Yeah, talking about opportunities. With this recent Corona and all that, sorry to bring it up, but I don't know, I think like world economies, people are losing jobs, all that. So I've been kind of fixating on the whole issue. And the issue, I don't know if like opportunities will be opening up, because I think like people are even losing. So I don't know how hard or how tight is it to get jobs like this period.
First of all, I would say I don't know. Two, I can say that most of the it's hard, especially like if you're in the travel industry. The travel industry has been hit a lot by this pandemic, because like people can't travel, companies don't make money, nobody's flying, nobody's searching for flights, nobody's booking hotels. So it kind of like cascades into these industries, right? So tourism industry is probably not where you want to apply for a job right now. So also is like many other parallel industries that seem to have been affected. But of course, I don't think this will go on forever. Like I feel like in a few weeks or like a month or like a few months, things will clear up. And I mean, is this just me talking? I don't have any professional pandemic degree or anything. It's just me as a person. I think like things will clear up very soon, and this is kind of like an opportunity to just keep working on your skills and just being ready for when things finally blow over.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, cool. Yep. Does anyone have, I can take one last question. Okay, it looks like there's none.
I don't know if you have any like last parting words or something.
Yeah, I mean, last parting words would be that like just keep learning. It's one of the exciting parts of the field. Like there's always something to learn. It could also get overwhelming really quickly. So you don't have to know everything. Like you don't have to know everything. Just some people for a larger part of my career, I just knew enough to do what I needed to do. At some point, then I started to feel like, oh no, I need to know more. I need to know more. Then, if I had the time, I did. So, like, if you don't have the time, then don't stress yourself. Just do your work. But also, there's importance in consistency and diligence. Don't do Android for 2 months today and then jump into backend for the next 6 months and then do Android for another 2 months. At this beginning level, I think at the beginning, you need a lot of focus on something to be able to actually get your skills up to the right level that you desire. So I'd recommend consistency, focus, and yeah, there's always something to learn. And also don't overload yourself though, even though there's a lot to learn. You possibly cannot learn everything, so you just have to pick either what interests you most or what is most practical for what you need. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, please, one last question.
So please, when is the right time to apply for a job? Is there any right time to apply for a job?
I think, I honestly don't know. It depends on you. If you feel like, okay, also depends on what you're looking for in a job. Are you looking for a job to like, yeah, I need a job because I need to pay my bills right now. So I'm just going to take whatever job comes my way. Or, okay, I have this job which is comfortable now, but I need a new job that's going to help me become better. A job that has more senior people that I can learn from, or a job that has more structure than I do here. Like, so you're getting where I'm going, because like it depends on your personal circumstances. I would also like to advise against jumping companies unless there's an actual problem. Maybe like your boss is giving you problems at work, then that's like a legit reason to jump. But like jumping ship because, hey, these people offered me 250K when I'm earning 180K, then jump. And then in 6 months, someone comes to offer you 270 and then you jump. So yeah, I would say, of course, money is important, but like you should, whenever you're looking for a job or taking a new job, you should also consider the career growth opportunities, the opportunities for mentorship, the opportunities for also the products. Are you going to be proud of the product you're working on? And also, will they pay me? Yeah, this I think you should consider. But I can't say anything specific about when. I think like if you're now in the learning phase, I would say you should invest more in your skills. Then if you suddenly feel like, oh yeah, I can do this. Then, but while you're learning, it's also good to look at job advertisements, look at excuse me, look at job descriptions for junior Android engineers or Android engineers. It's like seeing where you're going, right? If you're working towards getting a job, it's nice to look at the adverts for these jobs to see where you're going to. Yeah, if there are no more questions, I think I might have to leave now.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you
And thanks.
very, very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Segun.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Bye.
So I'll be shooting the mail.
Cool.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.